Mind unlocked. With every episode we cast real talk, real tools, wisdom on the fly. Tune in, geek out, reach for the sky. FPK, future proof knowledge podcast.
Jashon Mills.
Good morning, Alan.
Our very first show of 2026. Can you believe it?
It took some time getting here, but we have turned a year.
We have turned the year. And what an exciting year it is ahead. We don't know what's ahead. We just know it's going to be exciting and interesting. Well, it could be very boring, but we'll see. We'll see how it plans.
Boring in this? Never.
Had you a nice Christmas break, Jashon?
Oh, yeah, it was nice. Actually, it was a nice working break. The work never quits.
Ladies and gentlemen, this man is the hardest working man in the world. There is nobody can match Jashon for the amount of hard work this man does. So while the rest of us were taking an actual proper break, Jashon was taking a break by working. But Jashon, given it's a new year, I thought it might be interesting for us to have a bit of a conversation around a topic that we haven't really covered too much, but it does come under the banner of neurodiversity, and something that I think is really important for us to actually kind of delve into a little bit. Now, how I'll preface this conversation is first to point out that neither myself or yourself are experts in this field, but we're just working off our experience of being around people who maybe are impacted by dyspraxia or developmental coordination disorder, as it's better known as we'll just refer to it as dyspraxia here. And a lot of the young people I would have worked with over the years would have experienced it. A few people around me reckon I have it, but it's undiagnosed because I'm quite clumsy at times and bump into a lot of things. I think that's what we're going to do is we're going to dispel the myth that, Alan might have dyspraxia. Well, maybe I do, maybe I don't. But we'll see how the conversation flows. But I suppose to give people a bit of an introduction, dyspraxia has this, I suppose, for anyone who knows about it will have an idea. Generally what they'll say is, yeah, it is those people who are clumsy and they trip over their own feet and they bump their head all the time and they run into things and they're just clumsy. But dyspraxia actually impacts, I think it's about 6% of the population. So at least one child in every classroom is going to be experiencing the challenges associated with dyspraxia. So that's actually, while people might go, well, one in the classroom is not a lot. But if you extrapolate that over a full school population and then extrapolate it even further over a societal population, it's actually quite a lot of people. And I think it is important for us to start to discuss what it is, how people might come across it, what might be some solutions, or not solutions, but some ways that people can manage the challenges that are presented if they get a diagnosis of dyspraxia. But essentially it is kind of a lifelong condition that can affect that physical coordination. But what's more important, it's the brain. And it impacts on the motor processing that the brain has. So people might think it's a physical thing because you'll see the tripping up, you'll see the falling over, that kind of thing. But it's actually like a different firing of the circuits in the brain. So we're going to try and look at this from the perspective of beyond the clumsiness. Right? But talk to me a bit about life for you, Jashon. Like when you hear that explanation of dyspraxia, like can you think of people that you knew growing up or people that you have worked with in the past and you can go, wow, yeah, that actually could be that person.
Yeah, actually, I didn't realize it until reading a little bit of information on dyspraxia.
Well done. Yeah.
Excellent, excellent. Pronunciation of a lot of these terms in the neurodiverse realm are, I don't know, for me, difficult. So dyspraxia. Okay. So
Jashon, they're some of the most ridiculously named conditions. They really are.
yeah,
Anyway, sorry, go on.
no worries. After doing some research on this and looking around a bit, it made me, it reminded me of something when I was younger, in high school. I don't think I was probably midway through high school. I remember we had a friend, in my group of friends. One of them had a dad, and well, they all had dads, but this dad in particular, we all always assumed that he was an alcoholic.
Okay.
And that was what we talked about, like, um, when the other friend wasn't around. You know how friends talk about, oh, I don't want to go there, his dad's an alcoholic, this and that. Well, he caught us talking one day, and he said his dad had a condition, and it makes him look like he's drunk. Um, and I could never remember what the condition was, or what it was called back then. But from reading this, it kind of ties in, and it makes me realize, okay, yeah, now I can see what that was. And maybe it wasn't diagnosed. Maybe back then it wasn't popular and didn't have a name for it. But the son knew that his dad had this, the family knew, but everyone around just assumed he was drunk. And one of the reasons that we were talking about it that he had overheard was his father had got arrested, sober as can be. But the officer was like, you're not standing straight. You keep bumping into the car when I tell you to come to the back of the car and stuff like that. So I think this is a very important topic now that I understand more about it, because a lot of the neurodiversities people have sometimes reveal themselves as something else that we may think it is, like alcoholism or something else like that, or just being clumsy, when there's actually a medical reason behind it. So I think when we hear these different terms for diagnosis, that even if it doesn't directly affect us, or it's not something we're dealing with, at least take the time just to find out what the definition is, so that when you're in public, when you're out talking to people, when you're doing things, just living your life, you can help yourself cut back on the prejudgment by having more knowledge. Knowledge is power. We are future-proof knowledge. Get your knowledge. When you hear about something, look into it. You don't have to be an expert, but just understand what the diagnosis is, what the word means, what the definition is, and whether it ever comes up in your life again or not, at least you have it there, and you have a chance to educate somebody and make somebody else's life easier just by knowing something as simple as that. So I think this is a great topic we're talking about. I know very little about it, but that's what we're here to do: educate ourselves, educate others. And if there are listeners who's, I won't say suffer from this, because I don't think that's the right word. If you are somebody who has this diagnosis, or knows somebody with this diagnosis, and you happen to be listening to our live show, please pop in a question or some advice, and we will try to get our heads around dyspraxia and what it looks like, and how we can identify and support those with it.
Yeah. And I'm glad you kind of referenced that, because your experience with the friend, with the dad, because it is very easy for people to make assumptions. And look, when you and I were kids, there was no such thing as PC. So, but there was also very little understanding of neurodevelopmental challenges. So, we could look back and we can criticize, you know, you and your group of friends, or the other parents or people for saying things like that. Like there was a kid in my year in school, and his nickname was Trip. And like, really nice guy. Like he was a lovely kid. But what we did at lunchtimes, at break times, was we played football. That's what we did. And Trip was always picked last because he just hadn't got the coordination. But he loved football and he wanted to play. So of course we were all like, yeah, of course you can play. But he was never picked anywhere other than last. And for those competitive kids, they would kind of try and not pass the ball to him as much. But then, look, this is not saying that I'm a really, really nice person, but I've always been quite an empathetic person. Also competitive as well. So I didn't want to lose. But I would try and kind of pass the Trip and get a 1-2 with Trip to kind of be able to get him involved and at the same time try and still win the match. But again, none of us knew. The teachers used to say to him, "Stop being so clumsy," and he would openly say, "Look, I'm just really clumsy. That's always tripping over myself." And the parents would just like, "Well, Trip's covered in cuts again. You know, there he is. Knees are in shreds, elbows are in shreds. And how's he got any brain left in him because he's banged his head so often?" Like, but when I think back, like, he was part of the crowd. He was part of the group. And I suppose I'm going to go a little bit of a tangent, right? And I want to get your opinion on this. Like, it's really good that we've got a lot more understanding, right, of these neurodevelopmental challenges. But I wonder, have we gone to a place where people will now restrict themselves, or parents will now restrict their child, or other people might restrict your child from engaging in those things? So like, I could imagine now, if Trip was in school now, the teachers would just say to him, "You're not going to play the football." Or the parents might send in a note saying, "Look, Trip has dyspraxia. He loves football, but please don't let him play because we have been to the emergency room whatever amount of times, and the social services are starting to come knocking at our door telling us, what the hell are you doing to that child because he's constantly in the hospital." But Trip was just one of the lads. It's just that, he used to just fall over quite a bit. Do you think we've got to a place where we almost have to wear our challenges like a cape? Because people talk about superpowers, and I was listening to a podcast today with a person who was wheelchair bound after an accident, who said his disability was a superpower for him, because he was talking to the former Taoiseach, which would be the Prime Minister of Ireland, because he was campaigning for something, and the Prime Minister at the time went to shake this guy's hand, but he was completely paralyzed from the neck down. So the Prime Minister was extremely embarrassed and basically said yes to everything that this guy asked for. So he was kind of saying, sometimes I have to use that superpower for the greater good. I'm not sure what my question is, but do you think that we are becoming too defined by diagnosis or disabilities?
I understand your question completely. And it is interesting because, again, going back to when we were younger and in school, just like in the LGBTQI plus community, there was very limited letters
Mhm.
for that community. There was very limited diagnosis for the neurodiverse community. There was very little known about these different diagnoses or different behaviors and different types of things. Whereas today, I hate to use the word, the more woke, we're, we're in a more woke world. We understand more. I personally think, and I think this is going to be based off from every individual, but some families will take a diagnosis. And for instance, let's talk about me so I don't have to discuss other people. So our family, we got the diagnosis for my son. First instinct was, oh my gosh, keep it to ourselves. We can't let the school know. We don't want to tell anybody that might have any control over what my son does, because we don't want the school to say, oh, well, he can't do this, he can't do that, or classify him a certain way and pigeonhole him into a certain box. So that was our first instinct. But then I'm a different type of person. Instead of sticking with that instinct, I looked at it as, okay, well, it doesn't change who he is. It's just the way he is. So if it's just the way he is, that's neurotypical in my mind, because everybody is totally different. Um, and I just kind of decided, instead of letting it be something that we don't talk about and we keep it in the closet, it was more of, no, this is what he has. We're not ashamed of it. We're not embarrassed by it. This is just who he is. And it's kind of like when someone loses their sight, their hearing improves. Or if they lose their hearing, their sight. So when you lose one sense, other senses become stronger and become more powerful. So whatever it is that he's missing that society thinks he should have, to me, it's not that he's missing it, he's just stronger in other areas. So when someone has what society calls neurodiversity, they truly do have a superpower, because they've been denied something in their bodily ecosystem. So something else in their bodily ecosystem is much more powerful. Um, and it's trying to identify what the strengths are. And too many times when we're looking at diagnosis like dyspraxia, people get focused on identifying the limitations. And when you start identifying the limitations and you're focused on the limitations, then there's no room to grow. So you've got to look past the limitations. There are no limits to what you can do. So I truly believe that, yes, as society, I think we've gotten a little carried away with diagnosing everything. Like, some people may just be an asshole, but instead of being an asshole, there's a diagnosis. So it's
Yeah.
like, there's a lot of diagnoses out there. Some of them don't make sense, but for me, and kind of to your question, I think it is a superpower to have a neurodiversity. Even if you don't have a neurodiversity, you still have superpowers. It's just trying to identify what your superpower is and find it. Um, with the amount of diagnosis, I think lots of families and people take advantage of their diagnosis, and they try to use it for sympathy and to get whatever they can from states and government bodies or schools or just anything, resources. Um, and then you have some families that, of course, we all need the resources, but they're looking at the resources as a way to enhance the strengths of the individual, not to focus on the weaknesses of the individual. So I think as a society, we have gotten a little crazy with diagnoses. But I think being aware of the different diagnoses has brought us to a better place as society, because now we know what we can study, we know what we can try to some things have cures, some things have treatments that can just help you. But without having the baseline being a diagnosis, you really don't have a platform to start with. So it's kind of a mixed bag. We've overdiagnosed everything. We've prescribed pills for everything. And I think with everything we have accelerated to where we are now, each individual just needs to choose their perspective. Is it a positive or is it a negative? Are you going to focus on the strengths or are you going to focus on the weaknesses? If you focus on the strengths, the weaknesses will be improved just inherently. Whatever you do on one side, it's like day and night, they live together. So whatever you do to one, the other is going to react the same way. I think that's along the lines, but I'm in a rambling mood today. So
No,
that's what
I
I've
think
got
that's
for you.
a really good synopsis of it. And I think, like, again, and I suppose we'll always have to preface any conversation we have with that understanding that life is not binary, even though society is going to tell us that it's binary. So if you say one thing, that means you're completely against the other, when most of us live in the middle ground, because that's where the reality is. So it makes sense that you can say, we maybe we overdiagnose, but then at the same time you're able to say, but it's great that we have this baseline, and then it's up to the individual to look at, well, how are we going to approach this? And I think that's the big thing for any of the Future Proof Knowledge podcasts that we put out. It is about trying to arm people with some new information or some new techniques or tactics to be able to manage or support other people to manage the challenges that they may experience, whether it's due to a diagnosis of something or not, just general challenges that people might have on a day-to-day basis. But like, some people again might ask us, well, what are some of the symptoms that you'll see? So, like, obviously, like I said, there's the motor coordination. That's going to be a bit of a challenge where, there's difficulty with that gross motor and fine motor. So, balance, that's your gross motor skills, being able to cycle a bike without falling over. But then the fine motor things like handwriting and buttoning shirts, and zipping zips. Yes, exactly. Yes. There's a you just reminded me, right? So, as you know, I'm a big football fan, and one of the
Soccer
teams
fan.
Football. There's one of the teams I don't support, but they used to have a manager called Arsene Wenger. He was a Frenchman, highly, highly intelligent. Like, he changed the game in terms of bringing sports science in and stuff like that. And he was really successful. One of his teams is the only team in history in England to go through the season unbeaten. Go and look up Arsene Wenger zipping his jacket. The man, he literally, there's so many clips of him trying to zip up a jacket and he just can't get it. He just cannot get it. And the man was an absolute genius, but he could not zip up his jackets. And the amount of time just him getting frustrated with his jacket, and he's standing on the sidelines and a whole lot, and he just can't zip it up. But if we look at, like, yes, we can get away with not zipping up things. Yes, we can get away with not tying our laces. Things like handwriting. That's something that people can really get into their head about. My handwriting is terrible. Like, how many people do you know, Jashon, as adults, will go, oh, my handwriting is terrible?
Most.
Like, most, exactly.
Yeah. Very few say, oh, I have great handwriting.
My children have got great handwriting. It must be from their mum. But yeah, like, handwriting is something. And if you think about it, if you're someone who's in school or you're a child, handwriting is important because you're getting assessed on it. So going in, and if you're, teachers looking to see your work that you've done, you're like, oh God, how are they going to understand that? Because I don't even understand it. Like, that's something that can impact on a mental health or self-belief or understanding of our ability to learn. So that's kind of motor coordination. Then we've got things like the executive functioning. So people with dyspraxia can have challenges with sequencing. So, you know, the order of the steps that you need to take to do something. So, I don't know, planning out a report, writing a book, making a cup of tea. Like, people with dyspraxia can miss some of the steps that you might turn, like, you might look at me making a cup of tea, Jason, and I'm going, are you not going to put the tea bag in? And I'll be like, shit, yeah, I completely forgot about it. And we'll have a laugh and a joke about it. You'll take the piss out of me for the next 10 years, going, Alan can't even put a tea bag into a cup to make himself a cup of tea. But maybe that's just a symptom of the challenge that I have in terms of the executive functioning. But then some of the more kind of subtle ones are like things like the sensory processing. So people with dyspraxia can have like an over or an under sensitivity to maybe light, bright light, or loud noises, or touch. And I suppose that's not just dyspraxia, that's in a lot of other challenges as well, you know what I mean? But if you're going into a classroom that's very bright and you have a sensitivity to it, you're going to be stressed. If you're going to be stressed, you're not going to be able to learn. What are you going to do? Well, if you're male, there's a good chance you're going to try and disrupt the class and get put out of the class, so you don't have to sit in the one where the lights are kind of overly sensitive. I actually think, and I don't know if it's like this in the US, but in Ireland, most schools, the light switches are on or off. Like, how simple is it to have like a dimmer switch? It's so simple now. Maybe that can help. Then there's kind of something that I didn't know about until I was doing my research for this, was the, what's it called? The oromotor skills, I think it is. So there can be verbal dyspraxia, where people can find it hard to coordinate the movements required for clear speech. So there was an episode of The Sopranos, my favorite TV show in the world. I don't know if you watched Sopranos, have you? Yeah. So Tony Soprano, really nice guy, didn't do anything wrong. But he's going for his therapy session, and he's talking about, you know, life growing up, and he was talking about those kids who was always mumbles, and they call him mumbles, and they would just take the piss out of him and make him say things and talk about it. I've definitely come across people growing up similar, and sometimes these people will get in trouble in school for, you know, don't you be mumbling, speak properly. But that could be a symptom or an experience of somebody who's not diagnosed with dyspraxia. And I actually didn't even know that that's where it came from. So it's just, again, something to be mindful of. And then there's one that a lot, probably most of the neuro diversities that we talk about is the fatigue. So someone with dyspraxia, their brain is working 10 times harder than the average brain just to try and do the automatic tasks that can lead to kind of very intense physical or mental exhaustion. So for parents, there's a good chance your child might get home from school and just be flaked out. And you'll know your child. Some parents, when their children start school, will go, right, well, we have to do our homework, because we might not have an awareness of our child's being fatigued because of the school. But then as we learn, as they get older, we can kind of go, okay, you know, little Jimmy there, he needs an hour to just decompress, stick the TV on, play his computer, play his whatever, just switch off. Then we can look at approaching the homework, which I think we should definitely be banning anyway, because I believe there's lots of research that shows that they're actually, the difference in results is not that significant having homework versus not having homework. Anyway, that's a whole other conversation. Was there any of those elements, Jashon, that or symptoms that you didn't know about before we started doing the research for this?
Yeah, a lot of that I didn't know of. So like the impact in schools. So I've got a little quote here. Dyspraxia can hit the hidden curriculum. Things like lining up, opening lunch items, getting dressed for recess, packing backpack, copying from the board, cutting with scissors, art projects. So oftentimes these are things that students can get in trouble for, like you're not paying attention. Why aren't you? We told you you need to cut these papers, and we're only doing this for 15 minutes. Or lots of different assessments. You know, you've got a 30-minute assessment, and it's mandated by the state that you only have 30 minutes to do this. Well, maybe for someone with dyspraxia, it's going to take me 10 minutes just to focus on the paper and get the understanding of the instructions of what I'm supposed to do. So I'm in an unfair advantage, which is where it comes back to, we've overdiagnosed everything, but we need those diagnoses, because now that child could be like, look, I need an accommodation of time, because it's going to take me half of the 30 minutes just to wrap my head around the instructions before I even hit question one. And then when you're looking in schools, it can take a lot of toll on students. So you're talking about your friend Trip always getting picked last. If I'm a kid and I want to play a sport and I'm in school and maybe I have this diagnosis and I'm clumsy, but I know for the first quarter of school, the first few months, every time I went out to the sports field, I'm standing there, I pick me, and I get picked last every time. How many times am I going to continue to go out there to try to be involved if I'm picked last every time? I'd be lucky if I made it the first quarter of school, like the first few months. If I went out there 3 or 4 times and didn't get picked, or I got picked last every time, eventually I'd be like, screw it, that's not something I want to do. So you end up isolating yourself, and to the educators and the coaches and the other students, it's, oh, he wasn't a good player anyways, and he doesn't want to play, so just let him be. When in fact, the person could have been a very good player if you focused on one of their strengths within that sport. So there's a lot of things that I had no idea of, and I overlooked and just didn't even think about without knowing about this diagnosis. But then it's interesting because there's a lot of comorbidities that come with it, co-travelers that come along with dyspraxia. So it overlaps a lot with ADHD, although it can be something that is a single diagnosis, that can be your only diagnosis. But in the majority of the cases, it's going to cross over with autism, dyslexia, sensory processing, anxiety. So knowing is going to be the key of knowing the diagnosis is going to be the key of knowing how to make sure that each individual is getting all of the, what's the word, not care, not service, is getting the
Support,
best out of
really, isn't
life.
it?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, exactly.
To build themselves a fulfilled life. But like, and you bring up a really important thing, like the importance of the diagnosis. But there's probably going to be parents listening to this who go, well, we don't have the resources to be able to get the diagnosis. And the school are going, we don't have the resources either for you to get the diagnosis for your child. We all think that your child is dyspraxia, but we can't do it. That doesn't mean that you can't research it yourself and start to find some of the little tools and techniques that might help. And we'll throw some of these outages later on in the conversation. But just because you don't have a diagnosis doesn't mean that you can't look to try and empower your child to be able to manage those challenges as best as they can on a day-to-day basis. And obviously that's going to fluctuate because that's life. Like we fluctuate. And one of the other things is you'll hear teachers or grandparents or aunts or uncles going, "Oh, don't worry about it, they'll grow out of it." But the reality is dyspraxia is something that is lifelong, like dyslexia, like autism, you know what I mean? It's not something that just disappears when they hit 18 and become an adult. What happens though is we will find strategies that will work for us, that we'll just figure out. So, but some of those strategies might be, I'm just not going to go out to the football pitch again because that's just not something, I'm not getting picked anyway. That's still a strategy. So it's avoidance. And what I will say, and I'm glad you said that, like Tripp had a bullet of a left foot. He had one of the best left foots that, as in he could bang in a goal. Now, granted, he might trip up kicking it, but he would bang in goals. Like he had a much better left foot than I had. So like that, had we been able to find a way, or Tripp was able to find a way to manage his coordination so that he wasn't picked last, maybe he could have been good enough to play to a level that gave him satisfaction. Because
now, let me throw this at you.
Okay, go on.
Now, what if we had a very good coach on that team that said Tripp has a very good left foot? We have this particular play that sets him up where he's comfortable. And when we need this play, that's our guy right there. That gives him the empowerment of, this is where I'm really good. I'll try my best over there, but when they call my name, I know where I'm going to be and I'm going to do what I'm really good at. Whether I trip and roll and bang my head into the goalpost, that ball's going to come off my left foot and it's going to be sitting in the back of the net. Laughter or no laughter.
Yeah, you're right. And like I coached kids Gaelic football for years. And what I noticed, and even like growing up playing sports myself, like to be honest, most of the coaches were just happy when that child decided to drop out because it wasn't somebody that they had to pick anymore, which is sad. Like, and I don't criticize the coaches for that. These, a lot of the time they're just volunteers who, they're just parents who say, look, yeah, I'm standing on the sideline, I might as well coach anyway. And they don't know how to handle it. They don't know what to do. It's easier when they're younger, but as they get, as they grow up and the competitiveness becomes more intense and stuff like that. But you're absolutely right. If there was a coach who was willing to give Tripp that opportunity, but again, we're talking back in the 80s, Jashon.
Yeah.
It was just go home. You're not playing. Or you can stay here and watch, but you're not getting on that pitch.
Right.
You clumsy fuck. That's exactly what they'd been told. And if Tripp said anything back, he probably would have got a whoosh across the back of the head from the coach. Different times, my friend, different times. But yeah, look, I suppose we do find different strategies to manage it for ourselves. But you do bring up a really important point of sometimes it does just take that adult. And I will say that's one of the other things that's good about the developments in society is that we're seeing more coaches who are willing to give time, like game time, to those kids who maybe aren't the best. And like, so I played football to a decent level. And like I always said to my kids or any of the kids that I coached, bar one guy who was the best footballer in the town, who went on to become an international, like most of the kids who end up having a career at maybe semi-professional, professional level, they weren't the best kids at 12, 13 years of age. They were the ones who weren't the most skillful at that age, but they're the ones that put the work in week after week, training, practicing over and over and over. And quite a few of them built up really decent careers at a decent level. So there will be that kind of intrinsic motivation as well. And that can be harnessed by parents or by coaches, but sometimes that's just inbuilt. Because I've known many kids whose parents gave them no encouragement at all, just went out and did it and did it and did it. But I think sometimes we as adults don't understand or don't recognize the power that we have when it comes to the influence we can have over children to believe in themselves. So I think it is really important that if we're coaching that a trip, that we are giving that bit of encouragement.
Yeah, because I kind of see that as, I mean, if we take neurodiversity out of the conversation, and I guess sports is just easy for us to talk about in this topic, but you know, you look at a American football team, you have different positions. So you can have a kicker. So Trip the kicker has no hands. He's clumsy as can be, but sits on the bench until it's time to kick. In basketball, you have a really big, tall center. That's his position. He's clumsy as hell on the outside. He can't dribble. He can't work his way outside of the key, but he can stay stationary inside of the key underneath the goal, and he can block balls. Everybody has a position. Doesn't matter what the diagnosis, non-diagnosis, everybody has a strength at what they do. You find the strength, put them in that position, and let them work on the strength. I personally have a stutter that I've had since I was a kid. The way I've coped with it is I've eliminated probably 35 to 100 words out of my vocabulary. Just words I do not use. I don't write them. I don't spell them. I don't speak them. They're the words that I always trip up on when I stutter. So I've eliminated those words. I found alternative words to use. And for me, it works. I should try more often to use those words, but I'm 50 years old now. I'm going to use the words that I'm comfortable with. Now, sometimes when I'm hanging out with friends or something, I may use those words because I know what the words are, and they'll pop up in at the tip of my tongue when I'm talking, and I just get back in and I'll switch it around. You may never even know that I'm doing this in my head, but it happens quite often. So knowing where your strengths are, knowing where your weaknesses are, having an idea of the diagnosis. But I think where I was going with this, that's right. I was trying to circle this back around and I fell off the horse here. So going back to the damn it. Can't get back on the source. Said something. Okay, yeah. So coming back to the diagnosis, I completely lost my train of thought.
That's okay. It'll come back to you. It will come back to you. It always does. When you stop thinking about it, it'll come back to you. But interesting, like in the chat there, Caitlin was saying her brother has dyspraxia, and said school was shocking about physio for him too. They cancelled an appointment themselves because a French lesson was more important. For all the coordination issues my brother had as a kid, he took up playing indoor and outdoor bowls and darts, and he won trophies for his bowls team. So it just shows, you know, there is space for those people with dyspraxia to achieve. And I just had a quick search there, and one of England's current best rugby players is a guy called Ellis Genge, and he has dyspraxia. He's diagnosed at 14, and he's spoken about overcoming poor coordination and timekeeping to reach the top level. Like, that's not easy. And especially like the coordination of rugby, like it's so easy to be offside. It's also so easy to, and actually, it's only now I'm thinking like he's one of those players that I look at and go, oh, I can't stand him because he always hurts people. But I know if he was on my team, I'd be delighted. Right? But I wonder, so he can get yellow cards a bit for kind of hitting people late. So, you know, like in American football, they have rushing the passer and stuff like that. So in rugby, they have similar things where, you know, if you hit people at a certain height and stuff like that, I wonder how much of that is down to his dyspraxia. Now, there's a lot of rugby players who do the same, and they probably don't have dyspraxia. But it's interesting because he does get a lot of yellow cards. But so there's somebody who's got to the heights and the pinnacle, like he's a very highly regarded player, in a very technical sport where coordination is so important. So that's really fascinating. The search didn't throw up many though. That's another interesting part too. So I suppose, Jashon, like as we start to kind of move towards kind of some of the practical things that parents can start to do, or if someone's listening and they think they might have dyspraxia, but some of the simple things, stop laughing, right? Is looking at the environment. So let's stick with the child. So if I'm a parent and I think my child has dyspraxia, what can I do? Well, and it might seem obvious, but sometimes we don't think about these things that simply. Like maybe not having clutter in the house, maybe helping me tidy my bedroom so I'm not tripping over things all the time and bumping into things. I recently, I think I said to you, Jashon, I got my kitchen remodeled, and my wife has said for years that she was going to get me one of those rugby hats because I keep bumping my head. Anyway, we got our kitchen remodeled, and I was like, there's nothing for me to bump my head off. I'm so happy. Last night, I bumped my head off a press. Anyway, that's besides the point. But also things like ergonomic chairs can be very useful for kids. Then in terms of technology, like if you do have a diagnosis, you can probably go and speak to the school so that there is more emphasis on, say, touch typing or speech to text. And like when we talk about the work that we're building with future-proof knowledge, a huge part of that is text to speech and speech to text. So because we know that there are people out there who really struggle with it, and people maybe will not engage with something just because they may have to write, and they get so embarrassed. These are adults, so embarrassed about their handwriting that they just go, well, just walk over here and keep well away from it. So looking at different technology and how can you implement it. But in school, or if your child is doing something, getting movement breaks in place can be really helpful. And giving them space to kind of manage their fatigue. So like I say, after school, let them go and switch off. Like some kids I've worked with in the past love to just plonk themselves into a beanbag, just stick some headphones on or just look at a phone. And people say, oh, get off the phones. But what that can do is help them decompress from the mental fatigue that they've experienced. Now, if they're on the phone for 5 hours and then going, I'm just decompressing from my really tough day in school, that might be something that you need to address. But one of the ones that I suppose you and I really want to kind of hammer home within the FPK ecosystem is scaffolding. So I'll let you take this one, Jashon. What is scaffolding when we refer to it in this regard?
Scaffolding. So, I think I understand your question. So, can I use that like talking about courses?
Yep.
Okay. So scaffolding in courses. So, oftentimes you'll get let's say a math course, and everyone knows what typical math course is. You've got your problems, your solutions, you work through and get everything done, and it's just everything right there. The instruction. Um, So scaffolding, what we've done is we've taken courses and we've chunked them down into smaller pieces. You mentioned like a movement break. So lots of times people need a movement break, but you may be on a lesson that takes 30 minutes to complete. And it's just, there's no stopping. It's just, you start at 3 o'clock and by 3:30, you should be done, estimated 30 minutes, and that's your course. But you may get hung up somewhere in there. So what we've done with our courses on FPK University, we've scaffolded them so that they're chunked. You get small bite-sized pieces instead of having a whole. So we already take the math class for a year and we break that down into sections. So we're taking the actual individual lesson and we're furthering the scaffolding of that. So it's even more micro-sized. So you get one small chunk to master and then move on to the next small chunk. Once you master that, that's built on the first one, you take those lessons and you move to the third one. And that gives you a chance to have movement breaks in between, to clear your mind in between, and to not get too overwhelmed. Oftentimes in the neurodiverse community, too much information, you might capture the first bit of it, but then that information keeps coming in and it's just rolling off the back at that point. It's not really being retained. So by having that stopping point, by having that scaffold lesson, you get to a stopping point much quicker than you do in traditional courses, which gives you that chance to just retain that bite-sized bit of information and really understand it before you move on to the next bite-sized chunk. Was that what you were talking about as far as scaffolding, or did I go off on a tangent?
Absolutely. No, you hit the nail on the head. So it's about breaking things down into manageable bite-sized pieces so that the person doesn't have to think about the whole. They can just focus on this one bite size right now that is manageable for me, given how I process things and given how I do things in the real world. So give them those bits one step at a time. So instead of going to a child with dyspraxia, go and clean your bedroom. Go and pick the clothes up off the floor and put them into the wash basket. That's one job done. Yes, it might take time, but they need the time. And then you can start to scaffold on top of that and go, okay, here's a strategy to not have clothes on your floor. So in the morning, we go in and we pick up anything that was on there from the night before. And maybe the night before you can go in and check, okay, is there anything that would go onto the floor that can go into the wash basket now before it goes into the floor? So yes, again, it's going to be frustrating, it's going to be tiring, and parents are busy, absolutely. But when we think about the bigger picture as parents, we want our children to be able to manage in the world. We want them to be able to handle things and be able to deal with things for themselves, where they don't need mum and dad to do them for them forever, or a spouse to have to do it for them. So you're actually giving them massive life skills that they will get eventually, and usually quicker than we expect. So that could be really, really powerful. And I think just even like as simple as, getting them to focus on what they're good at, what they can do, versus the things that they can't do. Because we have our ants, our automatic negative thoughts in psychology. They're there for them anyway. they're going to tell, their brain's going to tell them a story about all the things they can't do. So we need to be the alternate voice that gives them that balance to kind of go, no, this is what you can do. And like when these dyspraxic people grow up, they actually can become fantastic big picture thinkers and problem solvers because they've had to find ways to work around. And if I'm quite a linear thinker, I might not be able to see these other options over here or here, whereas they could be the ones that go, no, I'm going all around here, and here's a solution, and boom, we've got a solution. So and then, like, quick fire, give them 5 minutes extra time. Saves you from getting frustrated, and then giving them in school handouts as opposed to getting to write things down, because that's going to take too long and they're going to fall behind and they're going to get stressed and frustrated that they haven't written everything down, and then they'll get given out to at home or get given out to back in school. Don't judge them if things look messy. They probably know where everything is, and then really focus on what they can do. So, like, all in all, Jashon, doing the research for this, I know you probably feel exactly the same as me. It's been absolutely really fascinating to find out so much more about dyspraxia than I actually knew. But then once you learn it, you see it in the world that you've grown up in and the world around you. So, like, ultimately, it's not a lack of ability. It's just a difference in processing. So, and like, asking people, how can I help you? How can I make this more manageable for you? They might know the answer, they might not, but you might be able to work together to try and find out a way of managing it so that they feel empowered. They're not feeling like this is this weight around my neck for the rest of my life that there's nothing I can do about it. And they become more confident in their ability to manage things. And then as they grow, they will be able to learn and find workarounds. So I think it's been, well, hopefully it's been useful to people listening. And
one last point from me coming.
I was about to ask you, any last thoughts? So go for it.
Yeah, I remembered what I lost my thought on. So we were talking about, sometimes it's hard to get a diagnosis. You may have thoughts, you may be like, what's going on? I think this might be it, but I can't get scheduled for 6 months. The school can't do nothing about it. So my recommendation, if you can't get a diagnosis, if your diagnosis is multiple months away, or you're just concerned and you maybe have an idea of what you're looking for, maybe you think it's dyspraxia, maybe you think it's autism, maybe you think it's ADHD, whatever it is you think it may be, my recommendation, create a observation checklist. Any AI will do it for you. Tell them what the diagnosis is that you're trying to figure out and ask it for an observation checklist. When you get this checklist, print two, one for yourself and one for somebody else. And the reason why I say that is do your observations, and you'll want to do the observations over about 2 weeks. Just around the house or when you're out in public, just wherever you might be, do an observation. If you notice something, check it off the list. With that second copy, I would recommend a third party. Maybe someone that's not really close and knows you and your child really well, but knows who you guys are. Obviously, you don't want a complete stranger, but not somebody who sees the interaction every day. Maybe a friend that comes by from time to time and knows the family. Ask one of them, hey, would you mind coming and hanging out over the next couple weekends for a couple hours and just watch? I'm trying to figure out something that's going on, trying to do this diagnosis. Here's a checklist. Just come over for pizza. We're just going to hang out at the house and chill for a couple hours and talk, watch TV, and see if you can get a third party to do the same checklist. Go back, compare them, and continue to observe until you get your evaluation that you're waiting for, or take the data that you did collect and make a meeting with the principal at the school or with the teacher and say, hey, I know we don't have an official diagnosis. This is what I've done. Here's a copy for you if you would like to do the same checklist in school. So maybe we can figure out together what's causing these distractions in class, or why he's not or she's not able to do these certain things or respect your request. And with your help as the educator and what I'm providing you, maybe we can come to an understanding until we get an official diagnosis. So you don't have to wait for the official. There's things you can do yourself. And I highly encourage, if you have any thoughts or concerns, try this. You'll be surprised, and it'll give you a little peace of mind. And this is coming from somebody who's been through it, who's dealt with it, who's needed the peace of mind, and it's a game changer just having a idea to focus on. Because in the beginning, it's everywhere. You don't know really what to look. So once you have an idea, you do some type of self-assessment based off of what you think it may be. You may find out that you're just barking up the wrong tree. And that's good, because it's going to guide you to where you need to be looking at. And that's what I have forgot to, that's what slipped my mind earlier. So I hope that's enough information for our listeners, for two guys who know very little about anything.
I'm glad you got that back. That was a very important piece of information. Listeners, viewers, people who've joined us from the off, thank you so much. Please do like and share and give us a review and spread the word. It makes a big difference. But we want to say thank you so much. Our first one from 2026 is in the bag. We will be back next week with another Future Proof Knowledge podcast.
FPK, Future Proof Knowledge Podcast. Mind unlocked. With every episode we cast real talk, real tools, wisdom on the fly.